Today is Water Sustainability Day, and throughout all the shows, we'll be covering issues related to water. Joining us in the studio for a look at South Africa's water profile is Dr. Anthony Turton, Chairman of the Water Stewardship Council, and of course, Lindsay is in studio in Cape Town. Dr. Turton, thank you for joining us today on CNBC Africa. Just give us a little background to what the Water Stewardship Council does and who you represent.
Well, the Water Stewardship Council is a relatively new creation. Last year we had the South African Water and Energy Forum, SAWF1, and coming out of that was an understanding that we are transitioning from a demand-driven to a supply-constrained economy, and therefore there's a whole lot of things we have to do differently about water. Then towards the end of last year with COP17 in Cape Town, in Durban, the whole idea of adaptation by large corporations came out, and coming out of that process was a decision that one of the most appropriate adaptive strategies is to, in fact, adopt water stewardship as a corporate strategy. And what that in essence does is it recognizes the risk associated with water, and it brings about an appropriate strategy which is really about behavioral change from being a consumer of water to being a custodian of water, in which case we then don't have a water crisis.
Dr. Turton, it's extraordinary, isn't it, that we should be talking about water sustainability when for many people throughout our lives we've been used to water being there. We turn on the tap and there it is. But I mean, you read books like, I think there was a book with a title something like Water is the New Oil, and even talk about water being traded on exchanges like a commodity like copper or oil or soybeans or something. Are we getting to that point? Is it that critical?
Well, yes, it's critical. Firstly, this whole idea of a water crisis is not a South African invention, it's a global invention. All over the world, we are seeing exponential growth in human population, demand for goods and services, etc. And unfortunately, water is a finite resource. It's finite, but it is also renewable if we respect it, and that's where the whole notion of stewardship comes in. So what you're talking about is the commodification of water. Will water be commodified like oil? I gave an address some time ago to Tufts University in America, and we discussed this whole issue. And the fundamental differences between oil and water, I'm not sure that we're going to easily see the commodification of water, but certainly access to and control over water will give corporations a major comparative advantage, and we're seeing this already happening amongst major corporations today.
Okay, just let's take a step back before we get into what companies are doing in South Africa. Just give us your view on whether we're in a water crisis right now, because we continually see these headlines bashed against the walls as we're driving across, through the streets. Water crisis in South Africa. Are we in a situation right now where there's a crisis, or are we kind of one drought away from a crisis?
No, the word crisis is a loaded question, and I'm uncomfortable with the word crisis. The good news about a crisis is that if we recognize that there's a crisis, we can do something about it. So we're adapting to that crisis. Are we on the brink of imminent collapse? No, we certainly are not at that point. South Africa has always been a water-constrained economy, and in fact, one of the remarkable success stories of this country is the fact that water has always been invisible, and it's just always been there. And what's really happening now is we've reached the limits of our current infrastructure, our current mobilization of water. And the most important thing is that we have a thing in South Africa called the National Water Resource Strategy, which is the official government plan, let's say, to balance the books, so to speak, to balance the national water budget. And that was done in 1998, it was published in 2000 using data from 1998. And in that we already knew that we had allocated approximately 98% of our total national water resource to productive uses. So that is as close to 100% as we can get. We've subsequently determined that some of the mathematical modeling was in fact flawed. So actually let's say for argument's sake that we have allocated all of our water resources. In some regions we've over-allocated by as much as 120%. So this is where water is now manifesting as a fundamental constraint to greenfields operations, and we're seeing this most notably in the Limpopo area, where you're seeing, for example, the Limpopo coalfields opening up. This is probably the new frontier of coal mining in South Africa, and one of the fundamental constraints that they are facing is water. So you're getting a lot of social protestation coming out there, trying to close down the mining operations, and there's a huge big thing coming out of there. I believe that will ultimately trigger a new social charter for mining. So there's a lot of interesting stuff happening there. But the bottom line is that it's not a crisis in the sense that we're going to collapse tomorrow. Major corporations are being very adaptive, and there are some leading corporations in South Africa that have taken a global leadership position. So they are very, very smart and ahead of the curve. The problem lies in the in the less adaptive companies, the major listed companies. Some of them are not quite on the same page yet. And of course the small to medium enterprises, where they simply don't have the capacity to dedicate an individual or portfolio to manage this problem.
Dr. Turton, we woke up a few years ago, I think it was January, February of 3 or 4 years ago, and we woke up to the fact that there was an energy crisis. Eskom hadn't maintained its infrastructure, hadn't invested in the electricity industry in South Africa, and so the mining industry closed down for 2 or 3 days. Are we going to wake up in 5 years' time one morning and the water's been cut off and therefore industry closes down as well? I mean, water is so essential to so many industries, whether it be big or small. Fracking, for example, in the Karoo won't go ahead because of the devastation it will cause to the water table. Are we at that point in a few years where, like at the energy crunch, we'll have a water crunch?
Yes, that's a very good question, because at the moment today we're launching the South African Water and Energy Forum, and what we're looking at specifically in that forum is the water, energy, food, climate change, so-called mega nexus. And that mega nexus is exactly about that. When I say we're moving to a supply constrained economy, the elements of the supply constraint are water, energy and human capital. So we're seeing the human capital debate playing out in this whole idea of the privatization of human resources, etc., labour broking, etc. And then on the water and energy side, we're seeing the water constraints coming in. And of course, our fundamental constraint to energy is not the amount of coal we have. We've got masses of coal in the ground. It's the amount of water needed to convert coal to electricity. So a rough ballpark number is for every kilowatt hour of electricity produced under current technologies, we burn 1 kilogram of coal and we evaporate almost 1.5 litres of water.
And then I'm going to interrupt you with and for every litre of beer that is produced by SAB Miller, 155 litres of water goes into that in the supply chain.
Yes. So now that's a good cue, because SAB Miller is one of those companies that's taken a leadership role. And they've said, let's understand where water fits into the supply chain, and let's understand how we can measure it and therefore manage it. So therefore they are probably one of the leading examples of how to mitigate the risk in that sector. Now just to give you a quality answer to your question there, that large number you've quoted isn't consumed water. Remember, water is not consumed. Water revolves around the planet in a constant volume.
It's recyclable, basically.
The water in this glass right here, at least one of those molecules went through a dinosaur kidney 65 million years ago.
Good to know.
So effectively water is a flux. It moves in time and space. Yeah. And that's what stewardship's about. Stewardship is recognizing that we mustn't treat water as a commodity to be consumed and discarded. If we respect water and treat it as a flux, it then comes back in time and space. So that large number that you mentioned for the production of beer, anyone that drinks beer will know you don't buy beer, you rent it, okay?
Well, let's leave it at that for today. Okay. I assume you enjoy your beer.
Yes, but the important thing is that it's not a doom and gloom scenario. In fact, there's a huge amount of innovation coming out there, a lot of adaptation taking place, and under conditions of supply constraint, I believe you're going to start seeing South Africa become an engine room of new innovation about how to do things differently, and the mining sector is probably going to be one of the drivers of that change.